Welcome, everyone. I am Winking Wong, class of 84, attorney, mediator, and volunteer, founder and leader of the MIT Chinese Alumni Group. I will moderate this event. Our guest will speak for 25 minutes and then take questions. You may start typing your questions now in the Q&A box, where you can also upvote the questions that you want asked. We are grateful to our guests who will share with us their expertise in countering anti-Asian hate and violence. Mr. Dominic Yin is a 25-year retired captain from the San Francisco Police Department. He has held commands in patrol, investigations, administration, airport operations, and special operations. He is currently the regional program manager for the Securing the Cities program. He has served as the director of the San Francisco Police Department Asian Pacific Forum and as the attorney of record for the Community Youth Center. He holds 2 graduate degrees and is a licensed attorney. He is also an adjunct professor and has written college courses in terrorism and academy courses in crisis interventions. Mr. Rex Deborah is Executive Director of the Asian Pacific American Community Center in San Francisco. He serves low-income families. Previously, Rex was Budget and Administrative Manager for the City and County of San Francisco Solid Waste Management Program. He was also a business owner and consultant. He also represented San Francisco real estate developers to build several million square feet of commercial and residential units. The links to their full bios are in the chat. Our topic today is countering anti-Asian violence, legal and community actions. Before we start, let us take a moment to remember those who have been killed and attacked due to anti-Asian hate. Our condolences to their loved ones. We also embrace those of us who are living with our personal traumas and the traumas passed down through generations. In the past months, in public and private meetings, I watched Asian men and women suddenly burst into tears when their suppressed memories resurfaced that as children, they saw their parents publicly attacked and suffered the painful silence and shame afterwards. Growing up, some of us have experienced our own traumas, but we also see now the hate and violence visited upon our children and yet again upon our elders. We hope that this event will connect us of different races, unite us, and empower us to work together against anti-Asian hate and violence. We are here for you. With that in mind, I now turn this event over to our esteemed guests, Dominic and Rex. Thank you.
Thank you, Wing King, and thank the MIT Alum Associations for having us on board today. Certainly, this is a very timely topic, and how apropos that today, May 20th, our president signed into law the Anti-Asian Crimes Bill. That is wonderful. It is worth celebrating, but if we look at it deeply, it's symbolic. It does very few things to pragmatically deal with the situation. Creates one position in the entire Justice Department to expedite investigations for anti-Asian hate crimes, and it also provides certain grants that individual police departments throughout the country must apply for in order to engage in those grants. And then there are certain deliverables from those must be accomplished. I'm here to talk about just the plethora, the reasons why this hate crimes bill was so necessary. You know, it's the plethora of 6,600 anti-Asian hate crimes committed just in years alone. And I'm not going to go into tremendous depth. I'd love to talk about every of those because I want to give credibility and voice and credence to each one of those families that have suffered in this last year. And it's important to remember that when we talk about these 6,600, these are the only ones that are reported. It's not the only ones that occurred. Because look at statistics, it's only about a quarter of the time that Asian Americans actually report a crime. So if we take that to be the key, we're missing 75% of the actual anti-Asian hate crimes that occurred in the last year. And if we look at another statistic, that 75% of these hate crimes are committed against Asian women, the youth, and against the elderly, it is a pronounced horrific situation. I just want to document a couple, and then I will move forward with what the department is doing, what the SFPD is doing, what we can do at the grassroots level, we can do at the individual level, and then I'll certainly engage Rex. Rex is a very well-respected community member who's done so much for the American community here in San Francisco. So to start out with, just think, an 84-year-old Thai immigrant in San Francisco died in February after being violently shoved to the ground during a walk. In Oakland, a 91-year-old senior was shoved to the pavement from behind. An 89-year-old child was slapped and set on fire by two people in Brooklyn, New York. Two Asian men were stabbed in San Francisco at a bus stop, where eyewitnesses report that the assailant simply casually walked away. That's what I'm particularly affronted by because, of course, it happened in San Francisco. This was just about 3 weeks ago. The implement used, this gigantic combat knuckleized knife, had it not struck the arm of the 84-year-old, it would and broken off, it would have absolutely gone and stuck her aorta. As it was, the blade broke off in her arm, which then also entered her chest, nicked her rib, and damaged her lungs. This is an 84-year-old Asian. I find it offensive because it reminds me of my grandmother. And I couldn't imagine the toll it would take on me and the rest of my family if my grandmother were to suffer like that. And these things on. And I promise I'm not going to go any further. I'm just going to provide a couple more. How about a stranger in New York slashed a 61-year-old Filipino-American passenger's face with a box cutter? We're talking, this event goes in right across the face. An Asian-American woman in New York City was struck in the head with a hammer by an identified assailant who demanded that she remove her mask. Asian-American rest employees in New York City told the New York Times they now go home early just because they fear for violence and harassment. So if you can appreciate the depth of this fear that our Asian American community is going through, it's absolutely incredible. I've had the benefit and the privilege of serving the people of San Francisco for 25 numerous commands, but that places a different onus on me. Not only do I read about these crimes, I go and I inspect those crime scenes. I talk to the victims. I visit them in the hospital. And it is a weight that few people would want to bear. When these remind you of your loved ones, of, you know, that 11-year-old that gets stabbed because somebody wanted his pairs of shoes. When a 91-year-old is, and this is 10 years ago, thrown off a Muni platform, which is about feet high, and the people that threw him off were laughing when they ran away, and this person died 2 weeks later. Yeah, it takes a personal toll. Okay, but one good, and I'm not going to share only the bad, but one good thing is that the San Francisco Police Department, the 11th largest police department in the country, has one of the best, the top hate crimes investigations units in, I would say, in the U.S., if not the world. The inspectors and sergeants assigned there are so empathetic and so kind and so well trained that they're able to get very valuable information from the victims and the suspects in such a way as to build a prosecutable case. And so at least here we have the benefit of an incredible investigations unit. But let's look at some of the grassroots things that can do. If you're wondering, hey, what the community can do, these are a couple of things. Think about how about voluntary roving patrols in the various Chinatowns? How about putting money together and having free rides for anybody who's Asian, who is fearful of going out and shopping or taking care of personal business, free taxi rides. Here in San Francisco, we have a $40,000 grant, and it's paid for a lot of these free taxi rides. How about taking, self defense? And you know what's great? Because of all this publicity surrounding these horrific events, we're seeing people of all colors stepping up to help Asian Americans now. And I think that's amazing. So we can't forget this fact that as Asian Americans, we're privileged to hold all of our traditions. And yet part of our traditions don't serve us very well. Asian Americans were taught, hey, be deferential, be respectful. So what does that mean? Oh, you look down. Well, that creates the best environment for criminals. Hey, if you're looking down and you can't describe the criminal that just you make a great victim, right? By also looking down, you're not getting a sight picture. You're not scanning your environment. You aren't able to see dangers that are coming. Plus, our Asian American youth, they're so tied on to their phones. They're engaging in TikTok and Instagram while they're walking. Well, you make the perfect victim when you do things like that. So those are things that I think Rex will share with you. And then after he shares that with you, I've got some other ideas that we can talk about in terms of reducing the anti-Asian, crimes. And then another arena that I want to share later is that this isn't new. Anti-Asian hate has been around since Asian Americans have been in the U.S. This is not a new concept. Our Asian American history is littered with instances of gross violence and horrific harassment. So with that, Rex, tell me what the community can do to support not only APAC, but also Asian American crimes.
Thank you, Dom. That's going to be a tough act to follow, but I'm going to start off just kind of describing, who APAC is. APAC was founded in 1999, really just to address the very issue that you just described. It was mainly founded by mainly monolingual Asian Americans who move into a more affordable community. That's the only place when they leave Chinatown, they wanted to buy their own homes. So they go out to the southeast part of San Francisco. And it's still not very well developed at that time, about 20, 30 years ago. So, homes were still affordable, but they didn't go out there as a single family. They went out there 2, 3 families at a time, pull their money together to buy a home. Sometimes you have about, literally now you have an overcrowding situation in a single family home. You got 8 to 12 people living in a home, right? So a lot of that. So when APAC was founded, there were a lot of attacks against Asian, specifically Asian immigrants at that time, because of the very things that you just described. We tend to look down. We don't engage in any conversation, and to their credit, many of these folks really can't speak English or barely speak English at all. So, they are kind of ashamed in that way that they're unable to communicate. So what they did is they kind of band and formed this group together And it started out with public safety workshops and how to address the very concerns that you just brought up. And it's not something that we can just teach once. We got to keep teaching over and over and over again. So what we do, we talked about, we engage them in a public safety workshop. We get those folks out there. We work with translation, service, including enrolling them in a CalFresh, which for some of folks outside of California, that's food stamps. We also try to get them engaged in an after-school program and all that. So anyway, it looks like Wing King had put a link of my organization. So you're right, Dom. Those are the folks, because I was involved in that, the Asian member that was thrown off the platform. At that time, the mayor and the police, if you recall, they thought that there was going to be a race war because of the perpetrator and obviously the victim. In fact, there were some gangs from Chinatown that we had to go out and reach out to them to make sure that we quell any kind of retaliation, because growing up back in the growing up in this town back in the 70s, Asian gangs, regardless of Chinese, Filipino, at that time, it was really violent. As as a police officer, it wasn't a fist fight. It became a gunfight, and sometimes innocent bystanders got hit, right? So I'm glad that you're addressing this, because Dominic, you are absolutely right. We have many clients that come into our center. They come in for different services, things like, hey, I want to replace my ID because I no longer have it. And we are also kind of obligated to ask them, because they come in with some physical injuries, right? Some of them with black eyes, some of them that slashed in the face, like you just described it with that Filipino gentleman in New York. So we ask them, because we have a partnership with the police department. So we encourage these folks to report it to the police. But you are absolutely right. Many of these things they really go unreported for various things. No matter how much we prod them, we can't force them to report it to the police, because a lot of them. So the few things is, they think that nothing will happen anyway, because they do read about it in the paper that a criminal gets caught by the police department, and literally before before the officer can write the report, they finish the report, the perpetrator is already out. And then in addition to that as well too, is it's not that easy for our community who may be working 2 or 3 jobs, right? It's hard for them to ask their employer, hey, can I take an hour, 2 hours of my time to go to the police station and complete a police report so we can have this on record. So I would even say that percentage of unreported crime against Asians are higher than what you've cited. I know the police department has this thing, but at least in my community over in Visitation Valley, it seems to be higher, because in the past maybe 3 or 4 years, the 20 potential victims that we saw in our center, only 2 of those folks really went on to report that crime. We've gotten to a point where we work with the police department. At one of the stations, the captains, we're fortunate because we've had some amazing captains that came through Ingleside as well. So Captain Hart, he's now teaching at the academy. He actually approved office hours for the police. So he had 2 days out of a week, he had 2 officers that are both, they were both bilingual. So they're able to communicate with our clients in that respect. So, and I'm glad that you're bringing this up. And there's a lot more things that we can do, obviously.
Right. No, Rex, that's fantastic, because 20 years ago, as a young officer, my very first day in the Ingleside, once that community found out both Chinese Mandarin and Cantonese fluently, I took 17 reports in one day. 20 years ago, I didn't have to go anywhere. I could just stand on the street corner and literally people would come up and, want to make police reports. 17 years ago. Well, I've been looking at some of the questions and there's so on what we're really talking about, right? So are there statistics on who the perpetrators and assailants are? Before I answer that, I want to preface it this way. We wouldn't be here, Asian Americans, we wouldn't have the same rights or anything else without the 1965 civil rights movement, right? So I give great credit to every other community that's allowed us to prosper and exist today, right? I mean, when you think about it, Asian Americans have the highest income, we're the best educated group, and we're also the fastest growing group. Even though we're only about 5.6% of the total US population, that's self-explanatory why our political power isn't quite as great yet, right? Because we only represent 5.6%. That's, compared to the 15.6% that African American populations represent. Now, in terms of, what are the actual statistics? I don't want to engage in rating or making people upset. However, a statistic from San Francisco that 85% of the perpetrators of Asian Americans are African American. And Rex had actually shared a little bit about this, about how Asian Americans are reticent in going to the police. And there's reasons for that too, because, depending on whether you're first generation, second generation, they come from a homeland that, the police were corrupt. You didn't seek them for it. You were afraid of them. You wanted to run away from them. So there was this no trust in policing. So here, we have to kind of overcome that.
So it's interesting, Dom, because we got that feedback at one point. They thought that they were going to be victimized twice, but that was one of the I remember I had a client like that about 5 years ago. Obviously unfortunately I don't speak Cantonese. I was able to understand it because growing up with friends that their grandparents only spoke Cantonese. That's a widely spoken dialect here in San Francisco, but I got the gist, with the translator as one of my staff. They said they were afraid actually to go to the police because they thought they were going to be victimized by the police too. After they had just lost their wallet, they thought that they were going to have to pay the police, whoever's taking the report. And even several minutes of trying to explain to them that that's illegal here, they didn't really understand that.
Absolutely. And so we have another question, like how do when facing such an anti-Asian incident, what's recommended action for one to take? Well, we are blessed with immense technologies today, right? So what really carries the day, what gets the public's attention is getting a video. If you feel, once you've scanned your environment and feel like something's going to happen, get out your phone. That's the best thing to do. If you have to wait until the event's over, take a photo of something. And don't be afraid to go to the police, and don't be afraid to do it. Even if you're just a witness, if you're not the victim, step up to be that person who helps that Asian American. Whether that person's Asian American or not, we should all be doing that, to be a good witness, okay? Another is, how are police able to handle the uptick in Asian American hate crimes in these big cities with large Asian communities, when the police, are also faced with the calls to be defunded? Well, good news and bad news. So the good news is, in major cities, San Francisco, we have the 11th largest police department in the country. So recruiting isn't that hard because people want to work in San Francisco. However, and over 12% of our department is Asian American. So we have, we're blessed with officers that speak really every Asian language. I mean, not just the 26 dialects of Chinese, where we're talking Hmong, Mongolian, Cambodian, Thai, Japanese, Korean, Tagalog, Cebuano. We're kind of blessed with that in these big cities. And really the calls for defunding major cities is kind of, so in San Francisco, we don't suffer that same call. You look at how massive our city budget is. So San Francisco has an annual city budget of 14.7 billion with a B dollars. So our police department, even if we take up, say 14 or no, 10% of that, it's still massively funded. So, right, how we go into, handling Asian hate crimes is, I can tell you, we have some of the most robust, vigilant general orders that deal with how to handle hate crimes. It is a step-by-step, almost like recipe book that a key officer must make sure happens when any type of hate exists. And because it's a hate crime, the highest ranking person at that, the platoon lieutenant commander level, has to personally review that report, go out to the scene, and then write up a summary so that the captain, either that evening or the next morning coming in, will get a report of that. And that's in addition to being sent directly to, our investigations unit. So it's pretty cool. Oh, I can see you want to speak. Right?
Yeah. So the thing is, well, that's great, Dom. That we have this, robust police force in San Francisco. I personally think, I might be slightly biased on this, but it's probably one of the most liberal police station in the country. And I know how you guys discipline cops here. My interaction with police, I might be a little different because, I do something different in my life, but, let's take Seattle for instance. But unfortunately, the message from Seattle about defund the police, right? Really kind of the rest of the potential perpetrators look at that and goes, all right, that's happening across the country. There's less police out there. There's less police in San Francisco. So it's easier for me to go to San Francisco if I live, say, across the Bay or up North Bay or South Bay from here. It seems to be, we're getting hit by a lot of crimes from, not necessarily, perpetrators from our city, but they're coming over here. I'm just kind of, wondering, is there thinking that we have less cops here now in San Francisco?
No, what it is San Francisco has tremendous blessings, but it's also got its challenges. And we have a very progressive, district attorney who at times, won't charge certain crimes. Now he's done okay with the hate crimes, but if you look at it, our current district attorney is a public defender. He won the challenge by coming from his background as a public defender. So that being said, if you were a criminal, you would always pick the weakest areas to go to, meaning where you're less likely to get prosecuted. And if you look at the prosecution rates between San Francisco and its surrounding Bay Area counties, we are pretty low on it. And San Francisco suffers from a geographic issue, and that is 90% of all the parolees in San Francisco live within a 9 square block area. And that's, where a lot of these crimes are committed. And everyone knows that. And with even with technology the way it is, we're a sanctuary city. We're not allowed to use facial recognition technologies. Because we're a sanctuary city, we can have anyone tell us that their name is X, Y, and Z and lie about their statistics. And other than a very small additional charge of interfering with police investigations, it's the safest way to answer your question is to say the environment is conducive to committing crimes. There's less prosecution in the city. That's the best way to put it. But the cops are still going out and they're doing their work. Think about it. A police officer in San Francisco is 14 different calls for service a day in a 10-hour period. Most other major cities don't have that rate. Small cities, obviously, you might have 1 or 2 calls for service a day, but a San Francisco officer is handling that kind of ridiculous amount.
So the workload is it's more than the average if you compare city, apparently, I mean, I do talk to these folks out there. I talk to these cops out in, that's patrolling. Um, I hear that same sentiment that you just said as well too. And they're always in a rush to, write the report and things like that. So, I was wondering, again, how to recreate this, but, I kind of just want to step back a little bit too, Dom, that unfortunately in your profession, in the law enforcement profession, what happens in Minneapolis resonates throughout the country, right? And I've always said about, I know there's going to be bad apples somewhere. No matter where you are, it's the makeup of mankind, right? We're not all angels. We're not all great people. But is there any move to, to, I mean, it's a professional environment. Police officer, it's the only profession that I can think of that you could either save a life or take a life in a split second, right? I mean, no other profession, not even a doctor, allows you to do that in this country, at least, right? Most doctors here just, can't take a life with that one person decision. But there's got to be some. Do you think the training is adequate to address? Because what happens is my community, the Asian community, we're asking for more police. I also know that that's not always the answer, right? But to me, the way I look at things is there's also a part of the community that's also been abused by the police. So, but there's a balance. But the only thing that frustrates me today and frustrates some of my, family and friends and neighbors that, hey, listen, my Asian house is on fire. You're my neighbor. Are you going to just let me burn, or are you going to come out and help me? The way I look at things right now is, I'm just not getting the, the loudest voice. I know there were some Asian folks that marched with the BLM, and I get what you said about the 1960s civil rights movements. And I'm not blaming the entire swath of the African American community, because I know for a fact, majority of the African American community, they're tired of, the despicable acts that's being committed, especially against the seniors, right? The Asian seniors right now seems to be a target because, it just doesn't, the trauma doesn't, start and stop with the victim. It's, as and it even goes to you, and you're not a family member of some of these victims, because I see it when I see people being victimized out there. I feel it now. Some of my, a couple of my colleagues, they're afraid. I mean, for the first time, I have, one of my office manager. She was originally from Hong Kong. She was born and raised there, but she's my office manager. It finally hit me when she told me. I mean, I was feeling it, but she really put it in perspective for me when she one day, we're having dinner at her house, and she said, what, right now I don't feel like I belong here. To me, that is super sad comment, and it really hit me to the core because, like you, I know without the Asian Americans' contribution to this country, the country wouldn't be as good as it is today, right?
Right. Okay. So to answer a couple of your questions that you posed there, the first question about training, California Peace Officer Standards and Training requires only 18 weeks for a peace officer to graduate the academy. San Francisco, we mandate 38 weeks. So we're way the state needs minimum requirements, and we're way above the national average. So we take great pride in developing our own instructors. We have we're, I believe, the only agency more than 3 active master level instructors, in the state of California. So yes, training does help quite a bit. And I would say that we do have that. In terms, I'd like to to some of these questions. I'm going to read one very quickly. It says, I'm I'm a female who will immediately help people being attacked, and she's not going to, stand by without doing nothing. I love that answer, right? But how do I keep from being attacked myself? You have to, if you're within a business area, walk into the business, direct someone to call 911 right away, and just start taking photos from inside. If you're outside in the car, stay in your car. Make sure, remember, a car is only, it's just a piece. It's an appliance, basically. Roll down your window, honk the horn, saying, I'm calling the police. You don't have to, I don't want you to physically go engage unless you're comfortable doing it. But you can help in other ways, such as that, right? Be a super good witness. As soon as the suspect leaves, subjects leave, make sure you provide help and comfort to that individual. Assess the medical needs. Do all those amazing things. Wait with the victim until police and EMT and medical arrive. Those are all amazing things to do, right? And Winking, I see you're on now. Are you going to start proffering these questions?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
So the next question is it time for political lobbying? Because the writer is saying that even though the federal bill was passed, only one senator and 62 representatives, he said one senator and 62 representatives voted against it.
Right, and that was very much along, party lines, right? These GOP representatives decided not to support this, which is, pretty frightening if we look at just its partisanship. And if you look at the racial makeup, I would dare to say all 63 are not Asian American. Let's just put it that way. And I see another question. It's a really great question. It says, what specifically can the average citizen do to reduce violence against Asians? I love that. Well, I want to address that. So first thing, speak out if you see a hate crime or incident. It doesn't matter if it's not directed to you. You could be sitting in a restaurant and someone is rude to the Asian server or the Asian cook. It's time to step up. You don't have to be rude about it. Just say, hey, I don't appreciate that type of Asian racism, right? Enough, okay? That moves on. And, even victim doesn't want to report it, right? Because again, maybe that Asian victim works 3 jobs to support his or her family, doesn't speak the language well, maybe doesn't trust the police. Report that crime, okay? Even if you're the witness, report that crime. It's not that hard. Hey, today at 7:55, I saw this occur at this restaurant, so on. Okay, consider getting not only yourself, but your group of people you work with to take part in trainings about hate. It's overall hate. Visit the anti-hate museums throughout the U.S. Those are things that we can all engage in at the age level, right? Whether you're talking to your kids, your peers, your superior. And you know what? Check in with your Asian American peers wherever you work. Check in with them. Say, hey, how are you doing? I know this is, there's a spike in Asian American crime. How are you feeling? Hey, I feel offended too. You know what? I want to ensure that I will be there to support you. Things of that nature, pay off huge dividends. Yep. Learn about the history of Asian American discrimination. It's amazing. In schools today, our second and third generation Asian Americans have no idea about just the immense racism that Asians have suffered in the last 150 years. Not just the Chinese exclusion in 1882. I mean, that's just the beginning. But think, here's a statistic. For every mile of rail Americans laid, not only north-south, but east-west in the US, at least one Chinese servant died for every mile. Where are the reparations for that? Think about in World War II when Japanese Americans were literally imprisoned because they were Japanese. Their properties were taken adversely by the US government. Think about after 9/11, Asian Muslims and Sikhs targeted. Think about what's happening right now, right, as a result of COVID. In fact, the FBI had a stat that said, hey, one of the things that they thought would happen which has come true, is there was going to be a spike in Asian Americans crime. And so we need to learn about, and we need to reinforce that with our younger generation.
You're absolutely right, Dom. And you brought up a good point about checking in with your peers. So for those, I mean, even Asians, we need to go check with our own peers, because I would have never found that out unless I asked my colleagues, right? How are you feeling? There's a lot of mental stress. There's a lot of trauma. It may not be happening to you directly, but by virtue. I mean, to me, I consider myself a pretty unemotional guy sometimes, and I'm not swayed. I think I'm pretty solid, but it hits me sometimes. It hits me when I see all these crimes. When the two ladies that just got stabbed recently in San Francisco, that was just waiting for the bus, like Dom said, that could be your grandmother, right? So there are a lot of things that we can do, because a lot of us are still not comfortable, even taking the bus or even commuting to work right now, or even at work for that matter. We never know who's gonna lash out, right? So I do have a question for you, Dom. So, what made you, you kind of answered it a little bit, but this increased violence against Asians, this most recent one, we've had many for the last couple hundred years in this country, because certainly those, the Chinese servant that built the railroad, those are, the ultimate violence when they came to pick up their paycheck, and instead they got a bullet between their eyes because they didn't want to pay them, right? So what really triggered this recent one? I know it was part of COVID, but because I can think of one guy that really kind of pushed this to the brink, because even in the most liberal city like San Francisco, we're experiencing it. It's gone over the top here.
Okay, before I answer that, let me just finish the last question.
Okay,
but what the individuals can do, they can advocate for awareness in their individual workplaces. So you can see this cascading effect, and we can certainly reach out to our elected officials, which has been super successful. You can see that today, is a day of celebration because we finally have anti-Asian hate crimes bill signed by the president, and hopefully it's going to have some symbolic effect, right? But your question is to, what's triggered this? Yeah, you know what? Clearly, March 19th, with the murder of the eight API women, right? And the fact that there was so much question about, hey, whether we should charge this because, the assailant, didn't outright just spew it out that, hey, I killed these 8 Asian women because they were Asian. Well, it's pretty obvious if the majority of the people you killed were, Asian, that should be an Asian hate crime. And if you read specifically California, well, this has happened in Georgia, but in California, our hate crimes in the California Penal Code, 422 is written so specifically that there was no way if that assailant were in California, he wouldn't be charged with a hate crime, right? So that was one of the issues that triggered it. And then just the atrocity. We're talking just the sheer violence, and also the now we're so used as a consuming public to horrendous videos on CNN, the instantaneous, transmission of information, because everyone now has a cell phone. Everyone now has a video. We can get video off of businesses and such. That's what's really transformed it. And we're also seeing a change in the generations, right? As our generation gets older and our younger generations, that second generation, that third generation starts moving forward, they lose a lot of the traditional fears of that generation. And they now demand, they demand police service. They demand to be heard. This is outstanding. So what we're seeing is that confluence of these that are allowing Asian Americans to fully take their place as citizens of the United States and citizens of the world, sharing in equal rights with everybody else. So, and part of that is in education. Here's a good antidote. So I'm teaching an admin into, or I'm sorry, an intro into the administration of justice course. This semester alone, over half were Asian American. Whereas in the past, I might get one, two, but this semester alone, half of them were Asian American. And they were very interested in learning about hate crimes and how we go about dealing with hate crimes. Thank you.
How do we transform some of your students to becoming law enforcement officers? Because I mean, that's really the key thing. You mentioned earlier, San Francisco, API community represents almost 40% here, right?
Yeah.
That you mentioned earlier, there's only 12% in the department. How do we get those kids engaged?
Well, first we have to, again, over the constraints of tradition, right? Because Asian parents, they don't want their kids, whether they're sons or daughters, to get into law enforcement. They see it as dangerous. They see that as blue collar work, where in fact it is absolutely not the work because of the constant near licensing requirements of continuing education. Your basic attends more school than anybody else in any other industry, right? Lawyers only need 36 hours every 3 years. A police officer needs, on average, 24 hours every 2 years. We get the same, just to stay, being a police officer. Plus, Asian American kids grow up with that idea of, ooh, this is a really physical job. I got to be just a monster athlete if I want to do that. That's not the case at all. Policers are paid to think, okay? They're paid to develop the best practices, which, police work is constantly changing, right? So what we're finding is that can think are going to do far better, or think quicker and better, or better educated, are going to do far better in this field of work than anything else. So, thank you for that question as well. Winking, do you have any that you looked at that may be appropriate?
Yes. There is one that I was very interested. What actions are being taken to address the 85% Black perpetrator problem? Meetings between community leaders?
Okay, well that's let me turn to Rex here.
So I actually, in San Francisco recently, I can only speak about San Francisco because that's what I know here. I don't see anything happening really at the state or a national level in that forefront, on that front. In San Francisco, there was some money allocated to go towards nonprofit organizations that serve predominantly African American community, which is, to me, I think it is a good program. There's still a lot of resources out there, but we really have to get to the core of this issue. And to me, from what I've seen in my work in the nonprofit world in the past, I've been the executive director for Asian Pacific American Community Center for the past 8 years now, right? And it's not just Asian Americans that I'm serving. We're actually serving African Americans, Latino families, et cetera. And we've actually even formed what's called a Visitation Valley Community Unity, which comprised of multi-ethnic African Americans, Asians, Caucasians, and Samoans in there as well too. But really, the way I look at these things, and I might get a little political here, so but I tell you, sometimes we just gotta say it. The thing is, like, even with this reparations, I think the government needs to spend more money and resources into education, because that really, a lot of these folks today, and the thing is, it's got to be meaningful education too, because we all know the challenges we have, again, specifically in San Francisco, and this is true in other major cities as well too. But especially this past year, I really got to firsthand experience of what the school districts priorities are. In San Francisco, our priority here, or our school district's priority, was to rename names of schools instead of trying to get kids back into school. So to me, that just showed, if I was a parent in one of those school in a public school, to me, I didn't see that as my kid was a priority. My kid's education is a priority. So many of the families moved their kids out of the public school system into the private school, because that's where really it starts. Many of these kids that are running the streets, and it's not just schools, you got to provide, after school program, outside support, because some of these families here, as I mentioned earlier, they may be working 2 or 3 jobs. So they don't have time to, go over the kids' homework. Some of the kids, even their own parents may not be there at home. It might be their grandparents, raising these kids. And if the parents are there, some of them in certain parts, they might be strung out on drugs. So so the kids run amok out in the street, right? So that's part of your, so I don't know if that answers that question about how to reduce the 85%, but I think we need to give kids opportunity, and we need to give them a fighting chance as well too. So to me, right now, our government, in terms of educating our kids here in this country, has failed.
Okay.
Winking, would you mind if I just
jump
started
in.
going down the questions?
Yes, go ahead, jump in.
So I'm going to hit 2 of the questions at once. It says, is this step-by-step playbook from SFPD available in other major cities? And can SF Police share its handling hate crimes methodology with other departments? We absolutely do. It's our general orders that we share with every other department. They don't even have to reach out. It's actually online. And you can get that. Our hate crimes methodology absolutely is shared with other departments. We put on hate crimes training that other departments can come in and use those for their continuous professional training. So we do that. There was a statement that the police can only do so much as well, which is absolutely true. Discrimination against Asians is inherent in colleges and testing for gifted and talented high school admissions too. Absolutely. We had a magnet high school in San Francisco, who was the only public school where you had to take an additional test and your GPA to get in. Well, now that's no longer the case. Now it's just a lottery system. So, hey, if you're left to select that number, you get to go to that school. It's a perennial top school in the nation. Its students, go on to the IUCs with, sheer numbers, right? Also, there's the question of, does California have a good Samaritan law that for people who help victims? Absolutely, but it cuts both ways. So as a good Samaritan, once you engage, you cannot leave that victim in a worse state than before, right? But if you're providing assistance, that's fine, right? It's the smallest things. If you see an open wound, make sure you have some kind of covering on your hand, but direct pressure usually helps, right? If you see a large gash, arterial type of bleed, then you'll probably want to do a tourniquet, right? Take off a belt, a plastic, a bag, whatever, tie it as tight as you can, right? Those are things you can do. Okay, here's one. Years ago in LA's Chinatown, there were Asian gangs committing Asian on Asian crimes. What is the status of Asian gangs today? And are they taking advantage of the hate to perpetrate crimes against our elders? That is no longer. So pretty much our Asian gangs now aren't as violent as they used to be. We've done a far better job of controlling the Asian American or Asian gangs here in San Francisco. However, they still do, and they do so for other horrible events. Not so much preying on our elderly, but new types of crime. For example, internet-based crimes. Human trafficking is incredibly profitable for our Asian gangs. So it's such a horrible event, and then the victims through certain tracks, right? So not just LA. Then, from LA, they stay 2 weeks and they move them to San Francisco for 2 weeks and then up to Seattle for 2 weeks. If they can cross into Canada, they will. If they can't, they come back down and they hit the various cities. So by the time the police those initial complaints, start the investigations process, they've already moved on to another town. So that for Asian gangs is the most event right now, which is human trafficking. But that's true for all other gangs. It dwarfs drug sales right now is human trafficking.
And I want to step in here. We have 5 minutes. And if you guys want to ask more questions, this is the time to do so, because if there are more questions, we'll extend our time to another 15, 20 minutes. But if there's no more questions, then I will wrap up pretty soon. But there's one more question left right now.
Okay, so actually there's a couple of stuff. Is it time to hold those responsible implementing the anti-Asian sentiments by all the rhetoric in the media and, perhaps a class action lawsuit? That is an absolute yes. The idea that, calling the COVID-19 virus the Kung flu or the China flu, I'm sure that is directly resulted in absolute, crimes against Asian Americans. And you see it daily today, right? It's reflected in the concept of spitting on an Asian American saying, go back home. We don't want your Kung flu here. Oh, those natures that just occurred in San Francisco. So yes, absolutely. If we can hold those people that spreads, this kind of vile content accountable, we absolutely should do so. We could do it at the grassroots level. When you hear it, you engage and say, hey man, that's not true. Right.
Yeah. So that kind of puts a kink into it, because apparently the guy, the man with the loudest speaker, unfortunately, he was in office when he was spewing all those garbage, right? Because to me, I think he single-handedly increased the violence against Asians by calling it, the Kung flu, the Wuhan virus, and all that other garbage. Unfortunately, we can't sue him for that while he was in office, right? And that's where it kind of leads me, to be careful and who you vote for and who you vote in office. While it might be good for your pocket sometimes, it may not be good for your community overall.
Okay, so let me just quickly answer some of these other questions. It says, where can we get currents on anti-Asian violence? That's beautiful, because signing of the anti-Asian hate crimes bill, that is one of the requirements now to adhere to these particular grant deliverables. So in the future, that will be the case. Now, the big 11, the largest 11 police departments in the country, if you go onto their websites, have links that will break it down by the types of violence, right? Burglary, robbery, rape, murder, but hate crime. So that's a good way to look at it. It says I'm a U.S. citizen to live in Hong Kong. It's like we're in two different worlds. Yeah, absolutely, and you're absolutely right. We do live in two different worlds, and I really appreciate your comments. And then the other questions, I completely agree that education reform at all levels is a necessary component of the solution. How does this get implemented in our school systems, and what does that look like? Oh man, Sam, that is going to cost about 17 days of discourse. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared or we have time to answer that. Rex, I throw it to you. Anything you want to?
Oh, I agree with you, Dom. To me, I think it's more like 17 years, right, of discourse. Really, the only way to fix this, I know I always go back, and Dom mentioned it earlier. Even though we're just a little bit less than 6% in this country, that's still a pretty big voting block, right? Sometimes some of these politicians only win by, a few hundred, a couple thousand votes. So our vote and our voice do count. And the thing is, if we demand more, traditionally Asian families demand a lot from their kids, so they can get into those schools like, Lowell, like what Dominic was talking about earlier. Um, we need to challenge them, and we need to challenge our politicians if we don't like it, because remember, we too are tax-paying citizens in this country. They owe it. We need to get something back for what we're paying for. Right now, we're not getting it, and we're not getting it by looking down into the sidewalk, because we're going to be completely ignored, right? We do have a big voice. It's not just us, it's not just our family, but it's our friends too, the non-Asians, that we could influence. And I can talk to a little bit more about that too later on, about how to influence people.
Okay, Winking, or anything?
See, looks like he typed that. But I can go on to this. I mean, really, the only way for us to get the respect that we deserve in this country, in this world, because if you put all the API community together, we're a pretty large group in this country, right? I mean, in this world. So the thing is, we got to remember, once you do have a position in a corporate world, or even in high levels of government, mentor some young kid out there to do, to show them what you do in your profession, and not necessarily just Asians. Sometimes it's even better if you mentor a non-Asian kid, so they get to know our culture, they get to know who we are, that we are inclusive. We're trying to work with the rest of the world here, so we're not relegated to the corner somewhere. So those Asians are quiet, they're not gonna complain too much, they're just gonna move on. The model minority label that we keep getting. Again, volunteer at your local community. Again, it doesn't have to be an Asian community. Show them, because doing things that are positive really speaks a million words when other communities see you doing all the good things, right? Donate to your cause, right? Any nonprofit out there that you can donate to. And then one last thing is reevaluate the law enforcement, um, the career, because it is, and I agree with Dominic, it's a professional environment, it's not a blue collar work. And it's and on top of that, it kind of goes within our culture too, where it's a safe place financially, because you get a pretty darn good retirement. Dominic got to retire at a young age of I won't say his age, but he's younger than I am, and it's a pretty darn good retirement. Yeah, you risk your life, and there's risk in every profession. Police, law enforcement happens to be a little bit higher than us, but if you do it right, if you walk the right side of the law, I think you can be okay.
Right. What about supporting Asian American politicians and politicians who fit? Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. And the thing is, remember, we had an Asian American politician recently that wanted to exclude the Chinese from this country, right? So again, just because that person is Asian doesn't mean he or she holds the same value as we do, or for the greater good of our community, because there's that self-Asian hating, like she was, right? And the people like that actually create a lot of damage, not just for her community, but really the American fabric, because you're tearing it a little bit, little pieces here and there, right? Because it diminishes, Dominic's accomplishments. He was a JAG, a Navy JAG. I mean, that's, and then, as part of a command staff and one of the most respectable department in this country. He's done a lot of things. I mean, it kind of diminishes that accomplishment, the things that he worked hard. Because and I can talk about this because I know, somewhat his background. When I was in high school, my summer job, I was a line cook. I did that for 3 months one summer in my high school, and I know Dominic, had some jobs like that as well too. but we all work hard. So be careful on who you support. And it is in somewhat, unfortunately, somewhat, it's kind of true that we need to get more Asian representatives to represent us, because sometimes, um, not always, but they will never understand the suffering that we go through unless they've walked our shoes.
And also the numbers count for non-Asians to see that there are a higher number of Asian American politicians.
So there are some, we do, in California, it's again, I want to just, speak about San Francisco. We have the first Asian attorney general, right? The first Filipino attorney general in Sacramento now, right? So there's going to be some, shuffling of chairs now, right? So there's some talks right now where we have a Harvard lawyer that represents San Francisco 19th district, David Chu. There's a open seat here, the city attorney. There's talks about getting him into that. Smart gentleman, right? He gets it. He gets and this is the guy that goes out to all communities, and especially Asian communities, because he understands the struggle, right? He understands what his parents went through in Boston, as immigrants. And so it's not hard for me to say, hey, I need some resources. This is what I need in my community. He already gets it, right? He comes up to me and tells me this. And there's other Asian politicians that do that. That's helped us provide resources and help with the constituents that I have, because most of my clients really are not very vocal, right?
Right.
They hide in the corner because, as I said earlier, most of them really don't speak English, so they can't go out there and protest. Unfortunately, I'm the only voice there to talk about Asian concerns in my community.
So how do we support you and the politicians who are trying to help us?
So the thing is, as I mentioned earlier, start in your own city first, right? Because we have people from different parts. We just had somebody in Hong Kong, right? There's a lot of things that are going on, right? It's gotta start. Like they say, charity starts at home, right? Look into those nonprofit organizations that serve. Again, first, if the Asian community is your priority, and sometimes we have limited resources, right? So, my family, we put most of our donation towards Asian causes and and the churches, right? So that's where our priorities are. So pick those type of services, because a lot of these organizations are doing good work. And then on the politician side, because stepping back again, the thing is, when we do that, we're not looking for some sort of reward, right? We already got a reward, so we're paying back. That's how my family views donation, right? We're paying, sort of like, I hate paying taxes because I don't feel like I'm getting something in return. To me, I'm paying back the people that I stood on their shoulder, that
Right. Yeah.
got me here, right? So on the politician side, again, before you support the politicians, look where they came from, because where they came from will tell you where they're going, right? I don't want to go into too much of the nuances when they get into office, because in California, so many representatives here, right? And the thing is, sometimes they have to cut a deal when they go there. You just got to be able to stomach that. Again, your priority is make sure they go in there. You pick the smart people that can shine, because you know what? As I mentioned earlier, Trump showed the rest of the country that it's okay for them to perpetrate crime against Asian, and you'll get away with it, right? So if we have Asian representatives in high office at the local, state, and federal level, it shows that there are some competent people, and these Asians are not quiet people. They are gonna demand their place in this country, right? Because we earned it. I mean, our history, as Don mentioned earlier, right? The railroad workers, right? They paid their due. They gave up their life to build this country, which we're all benefiting from right now.
So how do we hold some politicians accountable?
So that's a really good question. So the thing is, a lot of folks, Asians, we tend to just not get involved in politics, right? Because in our own country, our parents' countries and our grandparents' countries, some of the places we thought were, they got away from it because of the violence and the corruption, right? And the thing is, the first step is voting, and then get the rest of your family to vote. Get your influence your neighbors, your family. You just got to get engaged into that. And how do we? If you don't like what your politicians are doing, send them an email. Their email address is published. Give them a call. Right? Don't donate to their campaign anymore. Right? Donate to the people who have shared the same values as you. And if you notice, I'm not telling you which way to vote, whether Democrat or Republican. To me, an Asian, if an Asian votes, they're going to look at us. They're going to look at our numbers. What Dom just cited earlier. They're going to say, "Wow, these people, this group is a pretty big voting bloc. I better pay attention to them." Right? So we won't. Because right now what they're doing and is going back again. We have politicians that are creating this, that are changing the rules on us with the high school that Don was talking about earlier. Now that our kids have worked so hard, because let's face it, majority of the kids that's enrolled in that school that Don mentioned earlier are Asians, right? Because these kids work hard. They earn their place in that seat, and that's what we got to do, right? Now they want to change the goalposts on us, right? But they want to shorten it on their side. Now, how fair is that? Ultimately, that really isn't fair, because not even to their side, because once they get in there, they're not going to be able to compete, right?
Yeah. So it looks like we no longer have any questions. So I'm getting ready to close the event. Do you, Dominic and Rex, have any final words?
No, I just want to thank you. Attended and participated. It was fantastic. Thank MIT for this opportunity. This it's gratifying to see how many people in so varied places and different stages of their careers and lives who want to join in and share the single voice of stop crime. I mean, that's anti Asian hate crimes. I love it. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. Again, Wing King, thank you for inviting me and Dom here today. It is a very important topic that some cannot be swept under the rug anymore, because it's been going on for too long. And thank you, to the participants who participated, and especially with the amazing questions that you guys came up with. I hope that we continue this conversation, because we still have a long way to go, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Dominic and Rex, for your time and energy, and for your reality check for us. And you've been very honest, and we appreciate that. And thank you, audience, for joining us. We appreciate all of you, of course. We hope that you find this webinar helpful. We are here for you. Let's work together. We will continue to produce webinars and events to empower and advance all of us and our community. A rising tide raises all the boats. For the MIT community, please join us at the MIT Chinese Alumni Group. The link for joining us is in the chat. For members of the public, please send your feedback to my LinkedIn site and your email address if you wish to be added to our event invite list. My link is in the chat also. The recording of this event will eventually post on the MIT Alumni Association's YouTube channel. Thank you to the MIT Alumni Association for sponsoring this webinar. We look forward to seeing you in our future events. Thank you again for your participation. Be safe and goodbye. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.